So, when you look at Philippine law, you'd be forgiven for thinking it's kind of like a legal mixtape, right? A track from Spain, a sample from America. But what if I told you that all those written codes are just the album cover, and that the real music, the stuff that actually shapes how things play out, is happening on a much deeper, invisible level? All right, let's get into it. And yeah, let's just state the obvious right up front. On paper, it's absolutely true. So much of the formal law in the Philippines is borrowed, it's an inheritance, no doubt about it, from a long, complex history of colonization.
But come on, is it ever that simple? Of course not. Because if it were just a copy-paste job, the legal system would feel foreign, and anyone who's ever dealt with it knows it has its own flavor, its own rhythm, its own very unique Filipino soul. So what's really going on here?
Okay, so before we can uncover what's hidden, we have to look at the structure that's right there in plain sight. The legal framework we all see is definitely built on these historical colonial foundations. I mean, just look at the lineup. It's pretty wild. You've got your main civil and criminal codes. That's straight out of the Hispanic and even ancient Roman playbook. The family code, it's got deep roots in Catholic canon law. The Constitution itself, heavily inspired by American and French ideas of liberalism. Even how businesses operate and how ports run, it's all pretty much a Western import. The entire blueprint is borrowed.
And that is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? If the official rulebook was written somewhere else, why does playing the game feel so Filipino? Well, the answer, it turns out, is in three hidden layers. These are the X factors that are working behind the scenes.
Let's start by digging way back to the very first and oldest layer. I'm talking about what was here long before any ships arrived from the West. This is the ancient foundation of indigenous customary law.
Now forget about dusty old law books. This was law that you could hear. It lived in the community. It was passed down in stories, in songs, in chants. It was the wisdom of the elders. And this system managed everything, from property to family disputes. It was basically the original operating system for the entire society. And this is where you see the massive collision of worlds. The indigenous worldview was all about the community. Land was shared. You produced things to help your family, to fulfill your obligations. It wasn't about personal profit. Then suddenly this Western idea arrives that's all about individual ownership, a piece of paper that says, this is mine, something you can sell or lose. These two ideas are just fundamentally different. And that original communal mindset, it never really went away. And please, don't think this is just a history lesson. As the great Justice Puno said, this stuff is alive. It's part of the country's DNA. He's basically telling us that if we want to solve today's problems, we absolutely have to understand this ancient foundation. All right, let's move from ancient history to something that happens every single day. Our second X factor isn't a law at all. It's the living, breathing social psychology of Filipinos. It's the cultural engine running inside the whole legal machine. You know these words, right? These are the real rules of the game. A legal case might turn not on a brilliant legal argument, but on a well-placed pakisap, a humble request. Or it might be all about pakisama, keeping things smooth between everyone. And then you've got these huge forces like hiya, that deep sense of shame, or utang na loob, a debt of gratitude that follows you forever. These aren't just words, they are powerful, powerful forces.
But here's the thing. They're a total double-edged sword. On the one hand, an appeal to awa, or pity, might get a case settled in 5 minutes. But on the other hand, if someone's amor propio, their self-respect, their face, gets bruised, forget it. They might never settle, no matter what the law says. Just to save face, or maybe even to get gantihan, a little bit of payback. It makes things complicated and very, very human.
Okay, for our third and final layer, we have to go even deeper. We're past culture now. We're talking about a moral bedrock, a powerful belief that some laws are above any law that people can write down. This is the idea of natural law.
Wow. Just take a second to let that sink in. This is the Supreme Court of the Philippines saying that the right to life isn't something the government gives you. It's not in the Constitution because they decided to put it there. It's inherent. It was there before any government, before any laws. You're just born with it. That single idea is a massive cornerstone of the Filipino legal mind. So what is this natural law? Well, the basic idea is that some rights are just a given. They are part of being human. They're universal, and they aren't really up for debate or a vote. This is the philosophy that fuels the powerful conviction that life, for instance, begins at conception and has to be protected from that very moment, no matter what any man-made law says. It's a moral foundation that shapes and sometimes even challenges the formal legal system.
So, we have these three incredibly powerful, mostly invisible forces at play. We've got ancient customs, we've got deep cultural psychology, and we have this profound moral belief in natural law. So what happens when all of that collides with the formal system we see on the surface? Well, that's where we find the real X factor. So let's just put it all together. You start with that ancient foundation of communal life. Then you layer on top the powerful cultural rules, hiya, utang na loob, and the whole thing stands on this unshakable moral bedrock of natural law, where some rights are just absolute. Those are your hidden layers. And here it is. This is the main takeaway. The real X factor of Philippine law isn't any one of these things alone. It's the constant, dynamic, sometimes messy, sometimes beautiful interaction between all of them and the formal written down imported laws. It's that friction, that dance, that push and pull between the visible rules and the invisible soul. That is what makes the whole thing uniquely Filipina. And that really leaves us with a huge question to think about, doesn't it? If the laws on the books are from somewhere else, but the way people live and feel the law is shaped by these deep internal forces, how do you build a legal system that doesn't just manage a country, but actually reflects the true soul of its people? Something to chew on.